Welcome everyone. I'm Beth Jarris, Vice President of the Association of Public Data Users and a researcher at the Population Reference Bureau. And I want to welcome you to this rapid response webinar co-hosted by APDU, Data Index, and PRB. Given the pace of changes in data across the federal government, we're testing a new approach for raising awareness about potential risks to public data and, most importantly, how to take action. Just warning people about risks is fear-mongering. Warning and then telling you what you can do about it feels like it's purposeful. So we'll be sharing some specific actions today, and we'll follow up with that information via email at the conclusion of the event. And today, I am so delighted. We have an all-star panel. If we can go to the next slide. Each of our panelists holds multiple distinguished roles, and I mean multiple. The CVs are pages long. But since we have just 30 minutes, I'm going to highlight just one of their roles for each of them. So Liana Sayer is the director of the Maryland Time Use Lab at the University of Maryland. Bridget Schulte is the author of Overwhelmed: Work, Love, and Play When No One Has Time. Denise Ross is former U.S. Chief Data Scientist, and Megan Morey is former Senior Advisor for Data Policy at the Office of White House Science and Technology Policy. And together, they'll walk us through the highlights of what's in the American Time Use Survey, why is the survey so important, what are the risks, and what can you do to support this essential resource. So Liana, I'm going to start with you. Given your expertise in researching how people spend their time, can you give us an overview of what's in the American Time Use Survey?
Yeah, and thank you for organizing this. So the American Time Use Survey is an annual household survey that launched in 2003. It's conducted by the Census Bureau with funding from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And the goal of the survey is to measure how people allocate time across all daily activities. It is the only nationally representative, unbiased source of data on all of the different activities that adults 15 and older do during their daily lives. So next slide, please. So this slide shows all of the different activities that are collected in a time diary. So a time diary, we can think of it as providing a structured narrative account of daily events that offer unbiased and consistent data across individuals, across time, and across space on every daily activity. There are over 400 codes for very specific activities that are nested within these broader categories. So for example, we've got data on sleep and grooming, which are part of personal care, and eating, key metrics of health and well-being. We've got data on housework, grocery shopping, other purchases, childcare, elder care, which are all key investments in understanding, well, key investments in families and children, but also essential for understanding the changing lives of American families, inequalities in household and care work, child well-being, just to name a few. And the measures are really essential for understanding economic growth and setting economic and social policy. We've got data on paid work, education, civic activities, much broader assessments of productive activities that are not collected by any other survey over such a long span, 20 years and counting now. We've got data on all types of leisure, sedentary leisure, watching television, social media use, active, cognitive, and social leisure, which are important health behaviors and provide information about exposure to public environments. So we can think about time diaries and their collection of data across all activities as systems of behavior, and this gives us some insight into how behavior has changed more comprehensively over the years. Next slide, please. So ATUS provides rich contextual data on not just what people are doing, but where they are when they're doing it, when it happens, and with whom they are engaging in types of behaviors. It's a large, naturally representative sample, and so you can do comparisons of how and why daily time use varies across population subgroups and across state and sub-state geography. And we really need this data to understand behavior that is a key part of complex societal issues. All right, so my next two slides are about the module data that are also available. So the LEAD module was fielded first in 2011 and then again in 2017 and 18. It provides data on paid leave, unpaid leave, work schedules, reasons for needing or taking leave, work policies, and working from home. It's the only source of nationally representative data that have this information linked with how people spend their time, where they were, who they were with. And you can also link the module to the CPS. This is true for all of the modules and the time diary data itself. But for the leave module, this is particularly useful because of the CPS information on employment, human capital, household and living arrangements, just to name a few things. The well-being module was fielded in 2010, 12, and 13, and 2021, right during the pandemic. And the well-being module collects the experience of 6 emotions during 3 randomly selected activities during the diary day. So we can use the data to look at variation in well-being across activities, across demographic characteristics, and explore the relationship between risk factors for health outcomes and daily emotions and activities. All right, and last slide is showing the eating and health module. This has been fielded 3 times, most recently in 2022, 2023, and it provides information on food insecurity, cooking and eating behaviors in addition to the time diary data. And in 22, 23, we also have data on who in the household regularly does the cooking and the shopping, and how much they enjoy cooking and grocery shopping, as well as data on online grocery shopping. This module is totally underused and it's got some great data in it. So I will just end on that point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liana. I mean, clearly a wealth of data available in this survey. And now, Bridget, I know you've spent a lot of time thinking and writing about how people spend their time. So jumping from the what's in the survey to why is it important, can you tell us from your perspective why the American Time Use Survey is so important?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. And it's wonderful to follow Liana. It's truly one of my, a great pioneer and hero in all sorts of wonderful time use research. So I'm a journalist, so I come at this from a very different perspective. The time use survey, the American Time Use Survey is really used a lot by sociologists, researchers, economists, psychologists, and it really is, along with other data, but it really provides this full picture of human life and daily activity in the United States, as Liana was saying. It's really critical for understanding not only economic data, but our social well-being. And prior to the American Time Use Survey, a lot of the data was really anecdotal. We didn't really know how people were spending their time. And it really gave way to a lot of misinformation and narratives that would just sort of go awry. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So as a journalist, my first introduction to the American Time Use Survey was completely accidental. I was working on a magazine story. It was all about how, why people weren't reading the newspaper. And I sort of happened upon time use research and how people spent their time. And then that really opened it sort of cracked open an entire area that I didn't really even realize that we had a lot of information about. At the time, I was working full time as a reporter at the Washington Post. I had 2 small children. And like a lot of working, all mothers are working, but a lot of mothers who work for pay outside the home, I was just really feeling stretched and at the end of my rope. And I felt like I was really alone, that I was the only one that somehow couldn't get it all together. Feeling what was, would be considered time scarcity or time poverty. And it was really through looking at the American Time Use research that I saw that I was not alone, that these are actually large trends. And I think that's the key point that I want to make, is that the American Time Use Survey makes the invisible visible. It tells us stories about ourselves and how we live. It's really the only way we have to track the unpaid work of care and home, or the shadow economy, if you will. It's the only way we really have to track the value of care and care infrastructure. For instance, because there are also international comparisons, the International Labor Organization in 2018, they calculated using time use surveys in the United States and around the world that women primarily are still the ones that are doing most of this unpaid labor. It's something like 16 billion hours a year that people put in, which is the equivalent of about, a couple billion people working full time, about 25% of the world's population, with a value of about $11 trillion per year. Without that time data, this is unpaid labor that is not tracked in your typical GDP metrics. And so a lot of that is invisible, and yet it is really crucial for what keeps our economy running. So in terms of key policy impacts, it informs flexible work policies, telework, shift work. It informs childcare, paid leave policy, elder care supports, nutrition supports, tax policy. Some of the stories that we were telling, and this is why it's so important. During the child tax credit debate, there was sort of a narrative that people were using this money for ill purposes. And we really saw through the time survey how people use the funds and use their time to invest in their children. When I was working on Overwhelmed, the book, a lot of the narrative at the time was that when women entered the workforce en masse in the 70s, that there was this, that women abandoned their children, that they didn't have the time for them. And there was a lot of stigma against particularly mothers who worked outside the home. And it was really only the American Time Use Survey data that really showed us with data that working mothers today, or mothers who work outside the home for pay, were spending as much, or in some cases more, time with their children than at-home mothers were doing in the 70s. And why that's important is because then that just really flipped the stigma and that narrative on its head, and showed that no matter how constrained women were with their time, they were not going to disadvantage their children. And instead, they were spending time, they were prioritizing time with their children, that investment in human capital, if you will. And instead, they were taking time away from their own personal care, their own personal relationships, with spouse or with friends, their own leisure time. They were sort of stealing from other buckets in order to make sure that they preserve that time with their children. So those are just a couple of things, and I'd be happy to go on, but it's just it's been an incredibly important source for tracking not only gender divisions in time, but class divisions in time, to really help find the appropriate policy responses. Everything from leisure time, volunteering, commuting time, teleworking, paid leave, well-being. And there are a host of, anyone from the USDA, Bureau of Transportation, all sorts of different agencies that have used this data to shape policies that help us to live better lives.
Thank you so much, Bridget. Clearly, the policy piece is really important, but the part of what you said that resonated most with me was seeing yourself in the data and knowing that you're not alone if you're feeling overwhelmed and stretched too thin. So that I suspect that may resonate with more than a few people who are listening in today. So moving on, we now have established it's a detailed source. It is an important source. And Denise, I know you've been keeping an eagle eye on threats to public data, not just this year, but for years, and have a very good sense of what the potential risks are. So based on your assessment, what are those risks?
Thank you so much, Beth, and thank you, Liana and Bridget, for setting the stage for this conversation. There are some factors that bode well for the time use survey. I'll start with those. The first is that it gets a mention in the Bureau of Labor Statistics FY26 budget, although with a reduced sample size. So surveying 650 people per month this year, rather than 750 in the previous budget year and 800 in the previous 2 years. The other thing that bodes well is that 3 months before its expiration date, BLS submitted a request for an quote unquote extension without change to the time use survey through an information collection request. This is an indicator that they are planning for the collection to continue. However, I should note that discontinuing a collection does not require any paperwork, but it does take paperwork to continue the collection past its 3-year expiration date. And then lastly, the content of the time use survey is not explicitly misaligned with the administration priorities, so it doesn't appear to be in any crosshairs at the current moment. Next slide, please. This is the list of reasons that bode less well for our time use survey. The first is that there's no statutory requirement for the collection, and also it's not a principal federal economic indicator. I mention these because we've heard that agencies have had to sort their data into those that are required and those that are not in order to inform which collections they might eliminate. Secondly, the reduction in the BLS budget leaves them to focus on their core collections, which don't include the time use survey. With only so much money, it makes sense for agencies to protect their core collections rather than maintaining all of their collections and letting quality suffer. The next item is that survey findings from the American Time Use Survey might reveal negative impacts from administration policies, such as reductions in federal programming for Head Start or Medicaid, and news coverage and research publications on those topics could be viewed as politically inconvenient and be a ding against the Time Use Survey. The other thing that we're watching is that the time use survey depends on Census Bureau interviewers at the National Processing Center in Jeffersonville, Indiana. That site, known affectionately as Jayville, is in the process of a move to a more suitable facility. So it's in flux, but this move has been a long time coming. It was announced last October, and the building is now up for sale. But it's not clear how the build out of that new site is going. And also with the government-wide hiring freeze, it would be reasonable to assume that there might be some staffing challenges that could make this collection, this telephone-based collection, more challenging. And then related declining response rates and declining trust in government will also likely impact quality and differential response rates. The response rate for the time use survey has gone down from 58% to 32% in the last 20 years. And DOGE has indicated that it is reviewing all census surveys for termination, including those that are done paid for by other agencies. Next slide, please. In fact, on May 20th of this year, DOGE tweeted that they were terminating census surveys that they deemed to be, quote, not being used to drive any action or even looked at, unquote. So one of the surveys that they targeted here is conducted in collaboration with and funded by another agency. In this case, it's the Bureau of Justice Statistics and relates to their survey of inmates in local jails. BJS describes this survey as the only national source of detailed information on the characteristics of jail inmates, including special populations such as drug and alcohol users. So given all this, the current Federal Register notice is the best opportunity in the near to mid-future to convey to the Department of Labor and the Census Bureau how the American Time Use Survey is used to drive action, and that indeed many people look at and rely on these data. I do want to emphasize this is a garden variety public engagement and feedback that both the President, through his signing of the Evidence Act in 2018, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics through the Federal Register notice that expires this month have asked for. Back to you, Beth.
Thank you so much, Denise. Megan, I know when I need guidance on data advocacy, you're always one of the first people I turn to. So Denise mentioned Federal Register notice, and I know that that's one thing people can do to support the American Time Use Survey, but can you walk us through what else people can do?
I would love to. So let me start with Federal Register notices. I come from an organizing background, and I always think about the concept of democracy, meaning that power is in the hands of the people. But that's not just about voting. We also have to take everyday actions to make sure that we're holding our elected officials and our colleagues in the federal government accountable to the needs and wants of the American public. And the government provides a lot of opportunities for us to do that, but they're a little bit hidden from public view. One of those ways to hold government accountable is by taking a look at what they're doing, which they're required to publish in a document called the Federal Register, and weighing in on the changes that they're making to everything from federal regulations to data collections like the one we're talking about today. Each time the federal government goes to revise a data collection, they make a notice like the one you're looking at here, telling us what changes they're making, or if they're not making any changes at all and are just continuing on with collecting information in a survey. They're asking for our advice right now on the American Time Use Survey. And if we want to challenge this conception that the American Time Use Survey might be one of these surveys that is not used by the American public or not valued by the American public, this is one way we can do it. So if you navigate to this page, and there's a little URL for you there, you can click on this button to submit a public comment. Now, a lot of folks get daunted and think they need to write a treatise and write pages and pages and pages of explanation about why this survey is the most important survey in the federal government. But you can also just tell them, I use this survey in my everyday work. Maybe you would give an example to them about how you might use that survey in your work. You might say, I'm a journalist and I use this survey to explain how the experiences of women are different from the experiences of men. I value this survey and really hope that Department of Labor chooses to continue this survey. You can also write a treatise, though, if you are a real expert on data policy and you understand a lot of the flows of how this data interacts with other types of data. You can give all that detailed information to the agency through this form. I will say, as a person who worked inside both the Census Bureau and the White House and elsewhere in Department of Commerce, people read your comments. They listen to what you have to say, and it makes a real difference in their decision making. The people in federal government who manage these surveys and others like it are as invested in this work as you and I are, and they need your backup. When they are talking to DOJ about how important a survey is, it really helps them to have input from people like you about how important this survey is to their daily work and their daily lives. So I strongly encourage folks to navigate to this page, submit a comment. It can be as short as a sentence. It can be as long as a book. But whatever you think about this survey, it's important that you go on and tell our colleagues at Department of Labor how you feel. But that's not, if you may wonder if we can go to the next slide, by the way. These are some examples of comments. And you can see here, people write very short comments. And I will tell you again, as a person who's been on the inside, people really do read them and care about them. But people also write long comments like you see on the left that with citations and all the rest. And that kind of detailed information can be really helpful and powerful internally in agencies as well. You might be wondering, if you go to the next slide, how do I know when these things are happening and when I have the opportunity to weigh in? Fortunately, there's a really helpful resource that can help you navigate all of that. Data Index US, or America's Data Index, is tracking all of these changes for you and provides you with information about when you have the opportunity to weigh in. Denise and others have already mentioned that we're monitoring not only general change requests, which there's a huge number of those. You'll see the number here is like 710 change requests just in the last 30 days. There are many more changes than you have time to weigh in on, but we also let you know what Federal Register notices are out there and that are available for public comment, and the risks to federal data sets that are high priority. And then on I believe there's one more slide. I'm not sure if this is me or not, but I will make it me. If you also are submitting a public comment, we also encourage you to talk to us about how you use the data so we can include it in our advocacy. Americas Essential Data.us collects use case stories, which help us in our advocacy. And then one more slide here. There we are. The Federal Data Forum is a place you can go, again, to find out about these opportunities to comment, but also to talk with your colleagues in the data policy movement about these changes and how you might advocate. Hopefully these tools will make it easier for you to be part of this work of defending against the changes that are being made to surveys like the American Time Use Survey. And I hope to see you there. I'll pass it back to Beth.
Thank you so much, Megan. I want to take a moment to thank all of our panelists for sharing their time and expertise with us today. I want to thank all of you who are attending for caring about public data and wanting to do something to help make sure that we have robust data to inform good decision making. I was in an event earlier this morning where, it's, if we don't have data, nothing gets done. And just a reminder, in case you missed any of the links, they're on the screen now, but we will be sharing slides and the list of actions you can take later this afternoon. And I encourage you to all go out and submit comments to the Federal Register notice. Thank you all and have a lovely rest of your day.